Hello guys, so today I will answer all the questions of the topic French, quarter, war and religion. Uh, Question 1. Summarize the domestic and international historical background leading to the French invasion colonization of Vietnam in the 15th century and the 18th centuries. France established religious and commercial influence in the southeastern coastal region of Indochina and commonly known as the Cochin China under the control of the Nguyen dynasty. In the early 19th century, France supported Nguyen Ai in his fight against the Dacian movement, enabling him to ascend the throne as Emperor Zalong in the 1802. Later, the Nguyen dynasty gradually became conservative and isolationist under Emperor Mingma, and Catholicism faced severe persecution starting in the 1833, and the conflict peaked with French demanded the release of imprisoned missionaries, leading to French attack on Vietnam in 1847. During Emperor Duc's reign, Vietnam maintained a closed-door policy and banned trade and continued the persecution of Catholics. In the 1857, Napoleon III established in the Cochin China Committee with plans to invade Vietnam and quitting the Duk's isolationist policy and the persecution in Vietnam and to Vietnamese people. How did the actions affect Vietnamese society and Vietnamese people? Were there any accidentally good things that French colonists did in Vietnam? First, French colonists purposed for natural resources in the countries, particularly coal, steel, aluminum, and these are stolen from the country to enrich French. The second, they introduced industrial plantation growing rubbers, coffees, and nuts. And laboring in this plantation is equal to slavery with almost certain due with the poor workers at the end of the day. And third, Catholics enjoy a lot of benefits with the French government, and including free arable lands, construction fee, and leverage rate on the non-believers, and seizure of good land location. And this creates a friction in society, and why the current Vietnam government have a strict law about religion and child labor. That is not talked much about much. But during the French colonial period, kids are start working as that they reach 13 in rural areas even earlier. And where there are any accidentally good things that French colonists did in Vietnam, painting, Vietnamese art flourished due to financially being able to serve them in Vietnamese tropical weather, and this allowed for spread of artistic culture and creating more arts that still exist to this day. And about language, Latin alphabet spread, allowing Vietnamese to be literate in extremely first rate, which also allowed Vietnamese to communicate with each other through writings and hew factor in defeating foreign powers during this time. And uh, about music, French introduced new music genres from the West, the most fluent in being bolero music, new music, new musical instrument and singing techniques were introduced, and architect, new architectural designs such as Gothic, Roman, and Baroque influenced Vietnamese architecture, Many East-West mixed architecture emerged, diversifying Vietnamese architecture designs. Briefly present the 1954 Geneva Conference background, signatories and provisions. What countries that divide Vietnam at the 17th parallel from the time French colonists returned to invade Indochina. In the Vietnamese part, and President Ho Chi Minh aimed to prevent the war and resolve conflicts peacefully, and Vietnam signed two agreements with French in the 1946 to pursue this project. In October in the 1953, the French Parliament backed negotiation with the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, yet intended to negotiate from a position of strength. However, as French forces faced setbacks in Indochina, support for peace in French grew. During the Geneva Conference in April 26 in 1954, aimed at discussing Korean issues, the French troops were struggling in the Dien Bien Phu campaign. On May 3rd, the Vietnamese army launched its final assault, and on May 2nd, Western powers agreed to Democratic Republic of Vietnam's participation in the conference following Vietnamese victory at Dien Bien Phu on May 7, 1954. The conference began discussing Indochina. 9 parties attended, including the Soviet Union, China, and United States, Britain, French, and Democratic Republic of Vietnam, the state of Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. After 75 days of negotiation across 31 sections, and Geneva Agreement was signed, outlining resolutions for the conflict. French insist on the 18th parallel, while Vietnam firmly stood by the 16th parallel. It wasn't until evening session on July 20, 1954 that parties finally agreed to use the 70th parallel as a demarcation line. The 2-year deadline for general elections, along with ceasefire agreements in Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and other issues, represented a struggle between the parties involved. What countries support Vietnam during the struggle against French? The countries that supported Vietnam during the resistance against the French were the Soviet Union and China. They provided Vietnam with significant amount of weapons, ammunition, and force supplies. After all, do you hate French people because of what they did during their colonization of Vietnam in Vietnam? Actually, I don't like what the French did to Vietnam in the past. They exploited the Vietnamese people, and many innocent people had to die. However, Vietnam is now a peaceful country, so I will not hate French anymore. Question about Hoa Lo prison. Make the general introduce of Hoa Lo prison, the construction and history background that led to construction of the prison, the structure of the prison, the function of the jail in different periods to this day, the construction of historical background that led to construction of the prison, and the function of jail different periods to this day. Hoa Lo prison now is called historic relic. Hoa Lo prison is located at the address 1 Hoa Lo Street, Hanoi. In the past, this land was a village specializing in making all kinds of cellular and portable earthen stove. So this place is called Hoa Lo village. Hoa Lo means fire earthen stove in Vietnam. And when the French occupied Hanoi, This was moved to another place to get land to build court and prison. Because this prison was landed on the Hollow Village, people called this the Hollow Prison. And Hollow Prison was built by French in the 1896 and was named Central Prison. The prison was initially named Mission Central, and which was common euphemism for French prisons. The prison was used to lock up political prisoners fighting for independence in the war, and the location of a prison was located on the full land of Phu Khánh village, and the total area of the central prison and the neighboring roads leading to the prison are in 12,908 square meter. And while prison has an important role in French colonies in suppressing in anti-tourists of colonialism, so they built this prison for a large area with strong and complex defense systems. The building process was not completed, but in 1899, the French had to use it immediately because they wanted to capture people fighting against them. And many years later, the prison regularly uh, was renovated, repaired in increased the seal area. In the 1970s, they rebuilt toilets and filtering holes. In the 1945, they raised the wall surrounding the prison up to 1.5 high, and the original design of the French only contains 415 prisoners, but in fact, they had up to 2,000 people. And after 1954, the prison was renamed Hanoi Prisoner Detention Center and assigned to Hanoi Military Administration and the management of the city's authority from 1964 to 1973. This was also placed to arrest American pilots, and they called Hanoi Hilton. In the 1993, to satisfy the development of the capital, the Vietnamese government decided to a part of Hoa Lo prison was used to build Tower Center. Used at the hotel official, a part of prison next to Hoa Lo Street is preserved and embellished the memorial Hoa Lo prison. And Hoa Lo prison has been recognized as a historical monument by Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism since 1997. And currently, Hoa Lo prison has become a famous destination in Hanoi. What to explore Hoa Lo prison nowadays? Uh, Visitors to Hoa Lo prison will have an opportunity to see exhibit that show prison's history in two different periods. The first period is in from French colonists erected from prison in 1996 until the Liberation Day of Hanoi, October in 1954, and the second period in from 1964 to 1973, when Vietnamese government is to a session of the corporation to house American pilots. Inside the prison, you will see an harmonious French guillotine, horrifying iron shackles, brutal torture instruments, and as well as a statue of captives wearing leg chains. And the Vietnamese prison were mercilessly tortured and beaten on a daily basis by guard hears. And how were Vietnamese political prisoners treated in Hoa Lo prison? The prison must do hard labor such as ripping house or roads, building dikes, and cleaning toilets. They had to do hard work, and because they resign affected to their rations, if they couldn't finish the work, they got no food. and French colonists used many different types of punishment and suppressions against Vietnamese patriotic and revolutionary fighter being kept in dungeons and less slackling at all night, hard labor, and to name a few. What's, what was the difference between how the French treated Vietnam political prisoners and Vietnamese treated American POWs, prisoners of war? The way the French treated Vietnamese political prisoner and how Vietnamese treated American uh, prisoners were completely opposite. While Vietnamese prisoners were tortured and exploited inhumanly, American prisoners of war were treated humanly by Vietnam with its essential supplies provided to ensure their health. And do you live in all the information present at Hỏa prison give reason to support your answer. And actually, I've read some information on various websites stating that American prisoners at Hỏa prison were exploited and tortured by Vietnam during their detention. However, I do not completely trust those websites because I had read some documents before, and I said those pieces of for information are fabricated, and the U.S. did that to put Vietnam in a disadvantaged situation. Therefore, I don't fully accept the information present about our prison on those sides. Vietnam with USA. When and why? How long did U.S. get involved in Vietnam War, and why was the U.S. defeated in Vietnam? Firstly, about when. The U.S. military intervention in Vietnam from 1948 to 1975 involved a series of political, diplomatic, and military policies and measures aimed at achieving their objective in the Indochina region, with Vietnam as the focal point. And this process is considered a direct cause of prolongation of the Indochina War and also served as a trigger for subsequent Vietnam War. And the role of the U.S. gradually evolved from providing aid and advisory support to direct military engagement. According to official events, U.S. intervention in Vietnam is considered to have begun in 1964 when the first American combat troops landed in Da Nang. However, the seeds of this intervention and had been sown long before, starting in the 1945-48 during the Indochina War, in continued until 1975 when the Vietnam War ended with the defeat of the U.S. and collapse of the Republic of Vietnam. And why? Vietnam is a country Southeast Asia, and there were a number of long-term and short-term reasons to explain why the U.S. became involved in Vietnam in the late 1950s. And reason one, Vietnam independence. Before World War II, Vietnam had been part of French Empire. During the World War II, it had been invaded by Japan. Ho Chi Minh was the leader of the Viet Minh and resistance army which fought for Vietnamese independence. After World War II, Ho Chi Minh captured Hanoi in the 1945 and declared Vietnam independent. And the French tried to take control again, and but these were unpopular with the people, and they were defeated by Viet Minh at the Điện Biên Phủ in 1954. And peace of discussed at Geneva in the 1954 and Treaty by Geneva agreed the French could leave Vietnam and country would be split along in the 17th parallel until elections could be held. And the elections were never held in the country remained divided North Vietnam and Communist Republic led by Ho Chi Minh. South Vietnam was a capitalist republic by Ngô Đình Diệm. reasons too. Civil War, when the Viet Minh wanted to unite the country under communist leader Ho Chi Minh, and many of the South Vietnamese people supported Ho Chi Minh as they were unhappy with Malaysia. War broke out between the North and the South from 1958 onwards. The South came under increasing attacks from communities in the South Vietnam itself, and the reason three, the domino theory. This was a belief that if one country fell to communism, it was likely that mirroring one would also fall, similar to a row dominoes falling over. This had happened in the Eastern Europe after 1945, and the USA was afraid that communists could be spread to South Vietnam and then the rest of Asia, and it decided to send money, supplies, and military advisors to help the South Vietnam government. And how long? From 1948 to 1975. And why was the US divided in Vietnam? The North Vietnam, the US Army has superior conventional weapons, but they were inefficient against a country that was not industrialized, and an army which employed guerrilla tactics and used to dance charcoal as cover. Dedication. North Vietnam soldiers were dedicated to fighting for independence and for communism, and they were fiercely loyal to their leadership, and which had already provided land reform in the north. And foreign support, the North Vietnamese were supplied and supported by Vietnam with USA. When and why, how long did US get involved in Vietnam War, and why was the US defeated in Vietnam? Firstly, about when. The US military intervention in Vietnam from 1948 to 1975 involved a series of political, diplomatic, and military policies and measures aimed at achieving their objective in the Indochina region, with Vietnam as the focal point. And this process is considered a direct cause of prolongation of the Indochina War, and also served as a trigger for subsequent Vietnam War. And the role of the US gradually evolved from providing aid and advisory support to direct military engagement. According to official events, US intervention in Vietnam is considered to have begun in 1964 when the first American combat troops landed in Da Nang. However, the seeds of this intervention and had been sown long before, starting in the 1945-48 during the Indochina War, in continuing until 1975 when the Vietnam War ended with the defeat of the US and collapse of the Republic of Vietnam. And why? Vietnam is a country Southeast Asia, and there were a number of long-term and short-term reasons to explain why the US became involved in Vietnam in the late 1950s. And reason one, Vietnam independence. Before World War II, Vietnam had been part of French Empire. During the World War II, it had been invaded by Japan. Ho Chi Minh was led the Viet Minh and resistance army which fought for Vietnamese independence. After World War II, Ho Chi Minh captured Hanoi in the 1945 and declared Vietnam independent. And the French tried to take control again, but this was unpopular with the people, and they were defeated by Viet Minh at the Điện Biên Phủ in 1954. And Peace of discussed at Geneva in the 1954, and Treaty by Geneva agreed the French could leave Vietnam and country would be split along in the 17 parallel until elections could be held. And the elections were never held in the country remained divided North Vietnam and Communist Republic led by Ho Chi Minh. South Vietnam was a capitalist republic by Ngô Đình Diệm. Uh, what who was Viet Cong was an epithet, an umbrella turned to call communist the Craven Armed Movement and United Front organization on the South Vietnam, and formally organized as and led by National Liberation Front of South Vietnam, and nominally conducted military operation under the name of the Liberation Army of the South Vietnam, and uh, the movement fought under the direction of the North Vietnam against the South Vietnam and United States government during the Vietnam War. The organization had both guerrilla and regular army unit, as well as network of who organized and mobilized and present in the territory of Viet Cong controlled. About what countries supported Vietnam during the struggle against the U.S.? Why the war were associated fought between North Vietnam and South Vietnam? The North Vietnam was supported by Soviet Union and China, and the other countries by the Eastern Bloc, while the South was supported by the U.S. and anti-communist. After the event of the fall of the Saigon, to which countries did Vietnamese boating people and refugees go who left Vietnam then, and why did they left Vietnam? The number of boat people leaving Vietnam and arriving safely in another country totaled almost 8,100 between 1975 to 1995. In the 1975, roughly 4% of Vietnam's population was of Hoa people, Chinese in Vietnam, because Chinese support of the anti-Vietnam Pol Pot regime in Cambodia and perhaps anticipating of an attack by China's People's Liberation Army. The anti-Chinese contingent spread to all country, and after many Hoa people had fled Vietnam, the number of Hoa people in Vietnam was halved from 1.8 million to 900,000 in the 1989. And the boat people's first destination were Hong Kong and the Southeast Asian countries of Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, Singapore, and Thailand. And who the migration and humanitarian crisis was its highest in the late 1970s and early 80s, but continued well into early 1990. The southern Vietnam people who left their country in a mass between 1975 and 1995, seeing the China refugee crisis. And why, after Republic of Vietnam regime was overthrown, many people who had lived under the regime feared that they would be oppressed by related against for having cooperated with a third reform government, especially those who worked for the military, police, and government agencies concerned about the facing punishment, forced labor, or re-education led America to decide. How is the relationship between Vietnam and US nowadays? Do you hate American for what they did to your country and people? Why? The relationship between Vietnam and United States have developed strongly in many areas since the normalization of relation in 1995, the two countries have strengthened cooperation in the economics, politics, and security and education. The United States is one of Vietnam's largest trading partners, and Vietnam has also become an attractive investment destination for American business. And I don't like what the US did to Vietnam in the past. They plundered Vietnam and many innocent people had to die. However, Vietnam is now peaceful country, so we don't have it in the US anymore. And number five, Vietnam with China. Present the Chinese domination of Vietnam, and China dominated Vietnam for about 1,000 years and through four times. The first time from 111 for or 179 BC to AD, and this period ended with the HW3 Trung uprising, which against the independent from the Eastern Han Dynasty, and the fourth time from 1407 and to 1427, the Ming Dynasty reoccupied Vietnam, and their crimes, they seized land and forced our people to tribute precious products and silver, and even important goods like iron and stone were monopolized by colonial government. And they tightened control. They imposed mortars and forced thousands of skilled craftsmen from Vietnam to be taken their country. And besides the tribute policy, the colonial government also intensified a hostile tradition of following people emphasize their achievement. Trần Hưng Đạo, Quang Trung, Lý Tần Kiệt, and Ngô Quyền. Trần Hưng Đạo, his real name is Trần Quốc Tuấn. He was born in 1226 and died in 13,000, living to the age of 74. He was born in Nam Định, and his root, he saw exceptional qualities and being intelligent and talent, and received a comprehensive education. And in the 1288, the Mongol army invaded Vietnam for a third time, and he successfully applied the strategy of Ngô Quyền, completely defeating the Mongol navy in the naval battle of the Giang River. How about Quang Trung? Quang King was originally named Ho Thơm, later changed to Nguyễn Huệ. He was born in 1753 in Nghệ An, and now is known as a remarkable military leader and politician of Vietnam nation. He made immense contributions in overthrowing in the trade laws and eliminating a division between Đảng Trong and Đảng Ngoài, and paving the way for unification of country. About Lý Tần Kiệt. Lý Tần Kiệt was a renowned regional and high-ranking official of the Lý Dynasty. His real name was Ngô Tuấn, and he was born in 1219. He was from Hanoi. He was a famous military leader and politician during the Lý Dynasty of Đại Việt. He served through three dynasties and achieved a significant accomplishment, making him one of the two greatest generals of Lý Dynasty. And in the 1077, while driving away 2,500 Jews along the New Nguyệt River, it is said that the famous poem Nam Quốc Sơn Hà was created, which is regarded as the first powerful declaration of independence in the nation's history. And it can be said that he made tremendous contribution to fighting against the song of pacifying Champa, bring peace to build prosperous country. And Ngô Quyền was born in 898 in Đường Lâm Ba Vì Hà Tây. His father Ngô Minh, he was Thailand and virtuous chef. Ngô Quyền was intelligent and excellent in both in literature and martial arts. In 938, when the Han Dynasty sent troops to invade our country, Nguyen quickly gathered a force, defeated the threatened Kiều Công Tiết and confronted the Nam Han army. To defeat the Nam Han troops, he took advantage of the tidal chest to setting up a sharp iron take trap in the Bagdang River. When the army washes aggressively entered the river, our force lured them past the stakes and waited for the tide to reset. Then attacked from the front of the both sides of the river, causing the enemy ship to flee and collide with the sharp iron stake, shaking most of them. The Han prince died in the battle, and Nguyen achieved victory in the Bagdang. Invaded Vietnam. How about geopolitical control? Vietnam's location made strategically significant for China, and controlling Vietnam would provide a buffer against other regional powers, and enhance China's influence in Southeast Asia, and control and political domination. Throughout the history, China has sought to extend its control and political influence over neighboring regions, and Vietnam was seen as a cherished state, and invasions often aim to exert Chinese domination and spread influence ideas and about rebellion and resistance, Vietnam history and resistance against foreign domination, and including successful uprising, often prompted renewed Chinese invasions, and Vietnam were frequently seen a threat to China's or Taiwan. Why it defeated the first resistance in the 1258, the second resistance in the 1285, and the third resistance in from 1287 to 1288. And why they defeated? Firstly, about the unity of people. It was the most crucial factor during the China Dynasty beside the talent of General Trần Hưng Đạo. There were many other outstanding generals such as Trần Quang Khải, Trần Cảnh Dư, and the Duyên Hồng Conference also exemplified the unity of Vietnamese people who stood together to resist the Mongol invasion, and favorable geography, the terrain with the northern region being the very narrow and dangerous, preventing the enemy from advance quickly. The geography with many rivers and swamps, in climate humid with dense forests, or significantly diminished the moral and effectiveness of Mongols' army, which lacked experience in such conditions, and the Mongols was used to vast open desert where they could freely ride horse with a dry climate despite extremely temperature vegetations. What was the last official war between Vietnam and China border war in the 1979? What were the reasons for the war? And in the 1979 border war, commonly referred to as the Sino-Vietnamese border war in the 1979, was a short but intense conflict between China and Vietnam. It began in the 1979 when China launched an attack on Vietnam along the entire border between the two countries. The Sino-Vietnamese border was stemmed from long-standing tension between the two nations and lasted about a month, resulting in casualties and damage to both sides. And the war extended when China declared it had completely withdrawn in the 1979 after Vietnamese President Tôn Đức Thắng signed an order for nationwide mobilization during the conflict. China had captured the towns of Lạng Lào Cai, Cao Bằng, and several other border towns. Both China and Vietnam literally claimed victory. Although China suffered a significant loss and failed and to force Vietnam to withdraw from Cambodia, it demonstrated that its adversary, the Soviet Union, would not intervene directly to defend its ally, Vietnam, and the war also had lasting impacts on Vietnam's economy and exacerbated tension between the two nations. And the reason, the originating from the conflicts between the Soviet Union and China over Vietnam's fight against the US and China's unsuccessful attempt to pull Vietnam into its alliance. And China took actions this disadvantaged Vietnam as a forming and partnership with the US in the 1972, supporting the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia, and finally invading the northern border province of Vietnam in the 1979. And how is the relationship between Vietnam and China nowadays? The two countries officially normalized diplomatic ties in the 1991, although both sides have seen work to improve their diplomatic and economic ties. The two countries remain the dispute over the political and territorial issues in the South China Sea, and make the introduction of the Joseph's Cathedral history. The Joseph Cathedral in Hanoi, which was built during the French colonial period, it is a typical example of colonial architecture, was in capital of Vietnam. And during the French colonial period, Catholicism was widely spread, and as the Joseph Cathedral became a center of Catholicism in northern Vietnam, and there were daily and weekly ceremonies organized in the cathedral at the time. It served as a religious destination for thousands of Catholics in northern region, as well as a hiding spot for Vietnamese revolutionist soldiers. And in the 1954, after retreat of French colonists from northern Vietnam, the cathedral was closed to put under the administration the Democratic Republic of Vietnam government, and it was not until Christmas in the 1990 that cathedral was opened against for Catholics. A significance, as the Joseph's Cathedral has been the main meeting place of the capital of Hanoi, which often hosts activities of local parishes, and the site has been a magnet to both local and visitors because of not only its religious importance but also architectural of historical features. What was the last official war between Vietnam and China border war in the 1979? What were the reasons for the war? And in the 1979, border war, commonly referred to as the Sino-Vietnamese border war in the 1979, was a short but intense conflict between China and Vietnam. It began in the 1979 when China launched an attack on Vietnam along the entire border between the two countries. The Sino-Vietnamese border was stemmed from long-standing tension between the two nations and lasted about a month, resulting in casualties and damage to both sides. And the war extended when China declared it had completely withdrawn in the 1979 after Vietnamese President Tôn Đức Thắng signed an order for nationwide mobilization during the conflict. China had captured the towns of Lạng Sơn, Lào Cai, Cao Bằng, and several other border towns. Both China and Vietnam literally claimed victory. Although China suffered a significant loss and failed and to force Vietnam to withdraw from Cambodia, it demonstrated that its adversary, the Soviet Union, would not intervene directly to defend its ally, Vietnam, and The war also had lasting impacts on Vietnam economy and exacerbate tension between the two nations. Shortly present the following five most prominent religions in Vietnam. First, about Buddhism. Uh, Buddhism was introduced to Vietnam around the 1st century BCE through the land and sea routes, with early texts such as story of children to learning the teach from Indian monk. At the beginning of the Khmer Lui Lon, Bắc Ninh became the important Buddhist center, and uh, the formation of development state from beginning of common era to end Chinese domination, and the period proposed during the Ding early Lei Li dynasties, and they decline from later Lei dynasty to end the 19th century, where and for the revival period from early 12th century to present. Buddhism underwent various period growth and consolidation throughout Vietnam history, and modern monastic centers were expanding Buddhist teachings spread throughout the country. From then on, Buddhism has become a prominent Vietnam religion. And in the end, in the 12th century, when the Vietnamese Buddhist Association was founded to serve as an umbrella organization for Buddhist sects, its formation aimed to foster unity and preserve Buddhist teaching and promote social welfare. And currently, Buddhism has second largest number of followers in the country. According to statistics, there are 40.6 billion Buddhists. About the Roman Catholicism, Roman Catholicism has been present in Vietnam since the 16th century. Was firmly established in the by Portuguese in Italian journeys, and Vietnam has fifth largest Catholic population in Asia after Philippines, Indochina, and China, Indonesia, and there are about 7 million Catholics in Vietnam, representing 2.5% of the total population. And Catholic churches in Vietnam usually hold daily masses, and especially on the major holidays such as Christmas, Easter, and Maria Feast. Cao Dainism, the name of origin carries its also meaning. Cao means high and Dai means palace. So Cao Dai means high palace, which referred to a supreme place where God reigned. And Cao Dainism mainly exists in a province known as Tây Ninh, which is 58 miles away from Saigon. It resides in the cathedral named the Holy See, which was built between 1933 and 1955. Also, major religious center became the home nearly 8 million, and Damo in the worship of Mother Goddess, which was established in the Vietnam in the 16th century. This worship a branch of Vietnamese folk religion, but is more ceramic in nature. Dao is Sino-Vietnamese word, a religion similar to Chinese term Dao, meaning path, and while Mo means mother, and is learned from Middle Chinese. And perhaps the most popular celebration of Dao Mo, of Mother Goddess worship known to Vietnam people is Hầu Đồng, just ceremony in central state. The mediums dress up in a different colored silk robes to present different deities who are believed to bless people with health, luck, wealth, protection. Around the medium, tourism worshippers should cross legend with